charges, if it's money transactions, including time and place, of course, and how long is what the breakdown, according to stakeholders, on what this would mean is. Of course, the CA has a different view of what these gadgets that are called the device management system, if you like, or black box, as some have called them. So do you support that move? You can get in touch with us at Sophia Wanuna or at KTN News. We'd love to hear from you. But away from the spy plot by the government, we're also following the meeting between IEBC and the Jubilee Secretariat. Amongst issues to be discussed will be the IEBC involvement in the Jubilee Party nominations and a memorandum on issues Jubilee wish to be addressed. And joining me in studio to talk more about this is Professor Maurice Amutabi and Martin Ndati. They are both political analysts. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us in studio. So let's talk about, begin with the extension of the registration by voters. Of course, we'll talk about this meeting in a short while. Our Patrick Amima will be giving us more details on the same. But there was that ruling up to the 19th of February now. What do you make of it, Martin?
I think the courts are enforcing the law the way it's supposed to be, because the Constitution says that you close the registration 60 days to the elections. So the IEBC had issued an administrative edict that they will do the mass voter registration. But you know, in law there is no mass voter registration. So Okiya Omtatah goes to court and insists that that edict is illegal. Of course, it's going to put the preparation process in disarray, because IEBC has very strict timelines, and we are already running behind schedule. You see, like the integrated electronic voting system is supposed to have been acquired 60 days, to have been acquired 6 months to the elections. We are already under 6 months to the elections. We have not even started the procurement process. So once they start the process of acquiring that system, it might take another 3-4 months. And those who lose out might go to the appeals board, which will take another 2 months. Then if they lose, they go to court. So you can see we are in a very awkward position, because we brought in a constitution which we believe is progressive. But you know, there are also too many rights. And in the process of trying to enforce some of those rights, we are also creating a problem. Because the people have the rights, and Okiya and the rest of the Kenyans have every right of going to court to enforce the requirements as per the law. But at the same time, the IEBC must also be able to make certain decisions for us to have a free, fair, and credible election. So there is a catch-22 here.
Mutabi, what do you make of this? Because there are those who opine that at the end of the day, even if we had 3 days of voter registration, there is this human tendency, or whether it's what some describe as Kenya's peculiar habits, to show up on the last day. So that you'll have an extension, then another extension, but the queues are only long on the last day. You have 30 days, but everybody will keep pushing it. So does it really help to extend?
I think, like Martin has said, and I want to point out that in the previous elections, registration needs to take place to allow as many people to participate in the election as possible. We hear there are so many ID cards still being held in Huduma centers and other places. Those cards, ID cards, need to be given out to the Kenyans for them to register. And I think if you look at the constitutional requirement, is that IEBC should never close these registers for registration. Registration to be a continuous, ongoing process.
But isn't it already continuous at the constituency level?
Yes, it should. It should. But the problem is that the offices are so much dispersed and apart from each other that is doesn't reach the very mananchi. What should have had happening is that they can go to universities, to schools, to marketplaces, and so on, than just being confined to a polling station, for example, or a registration center. But I think the challenge that we are realizing, and what your question addresses, Sophia, is that we begin to see a situation where Kenyans like to operate on the last day. They have all 3 months register, or a month register, or 2 weeks, but on the last day they show up. It's a uniquely Kenyan behavior, and which I think if you are a good planner, you should factor that in. And Kenyans are expecting an extension. The MPs, everybody was asking for extension. So if you give them just ideally 2, 3, 4 more days after the deadline, then many will have registered. But the idea of being so rigid, saying that we'll never extend, this is the deadline, you register at that time or not, will not extend. And understanding Kenyan dynamics, when you plan, you also plan to your constituents, you plan to environment. Kenyans like to do anything. Use a last minute. There's a last minute rush. So you plan for that. And then the issue of IBC not being prepared for an election because they have not procured machines is illogical. Every election monitoring body, every election conducting body, every commission that I know across the world usually has plan A, B, and C. It's only in Kenya where IBC has just plan A, that let's procure machines and so on. I saw the case of India, where they even talked about borrowing BVR kits from Canada.
Okay.
You should even IBC having preparations for that, so that in case procurement fails, you have a plan B to borrow from South Africa, to borrow from India, bring them massively in a cargo plane and conduct elections. So the issue of procurement issues delaying them is not an issue at all.
So let's listen to the Devolution Cabinet Secretary, that is Mwangi Kiunjuri, and what he had to say in as far as some of what we're witnessing in us with election preparedness.
Constitutional crisis, whereby it will be very difficult for us to hold elections come August. The only way they can win that is through the courts that will rule in their favor. Are Kenyans questioning themselves what will happen now that the courts have ordered that we have a new tender be floated for the printing of ballots, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah. They have said that we repeat the tender again. Which guarantee do we have that the same opposition will not go to court again after we award the tender, and again they will nullify the tender once again?
That some of these extensions and litigation moving to court and the rulings have an impact, and a serious one at that, even at the election date.
Yeah, they are going to pose very serious challenges. But you know, like now, in terms of printing the ballots, if the IEBC realizes there is a problem, they can go to the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs and seek a waiver. You know, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee is the one which handles issues of IEBC. So what Justice Odunga ruled, and it is legal, was that it was wrong for commissioners who had basically resigned to participate in the award of the tender. And you know, once it was agreed by the parties in parliament that the commissioners are supposed to exit, they were not supposed to make serious decisions in the commission. So it was wrong for them to sit and award that tender. And that's what the court ruled, you know. So whatever decisions they made, and you know, it is even going to affect the by-elections. You remember the Nyacheke, the one in Turkana, Lord Call, and these other places. Somebody can very easily go to court and seek that those elections should be nullified. Because they didn't have, legally they didn't have those powers, because they were still sitting in the commission on an interim basis, waiting for the new commissioners to come in, then they exit. But they didn't have the legal mandate to because they had basically resigned and handed in their resignation letters to the president. So those timelines are going to pose a challenge. And the current commissioners need to be very creative with the CEO, so that where they realize they are having a challenge, they need to engage the political parties and the main players who are Jubilee and NASA, so that they are part of the process. Then they go and sit with the relevant committees of parliament to be able to come up with solutions to some of those problems. Because, like Professor has said, you see, like the issue of the integrated electronic voting system, they don't need to buy the equipment, because if you are going to buy it, it's going to take a very long time. So why don't you lease? Because Ghana had elections the other day, Nigeria had elections the other day, Rwanda has those machines, India has. So instead of us going through a long, rigorous process, which is expensive and which is going to cause us bottlenecks, you seek a waiver from the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee and you lease the equipment. So after the elections, you send back the equipment.
You can send them back. All right, and we'll continue with this conversation. I want us to bring in the aspect as well of the political parties and their preparedness ahead of the elections, because today Jubilee is set to meet the chairperson, IEBC, that's Wafula Chebukati. He will lead his commission in meeting members of the Jubilee Secretariat. Our Patrick Amimo is following that story for us. Of course, among the issues that they'll be discussing will be the involvement of the IEBC on party primaries for Jubilee and a memorandum on issues Jubilee would want addressed. Now, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission To finance the nomination of its candidates is what Jubilee had sought. According to the Election Amendment Act 2016, IEBC can be requested by a party to conduct and supervise its nominations for presidential, parliamentary or county elections. Patrick Amimo now joins us to tell us what else to expect. Patrick, it's good to see you. We have heard from IEBC in the past that they are quite stretched as far as election preparedness is concerned. So are we seeing this meeting being successful in as far as Jubilee's request for IEBC to conduct the nominations is concerned?
Thank you, Sophia. Indeed, this particular meeting is they're already having a closed-door meeting. That's the IEBC commissioners with some leaders from Jubilee at their headquarters in Pangani, Nairobi, and some of these part of the outreach program that IEBC has engaged itself in. We saw last week they were at State House, met the President Uhuru Kenyatta, who assured them that the government will fully fund IEBC activities in the run-up to the August polls. We also saw last week the IEBC commissioners met the NASA leadership at their head office and discussed a range of issues that the opposition was concerned about with regard to the voter register, the double registration of voters, and other worries that the opposition had over this process to ensure that there is a level playing field ahead of the August polls. So it is an outreach program. IEBC is going out to meet all stakeholders in this particular party, in this particular election. And as of now, they are having a closed-door meeting. But of interest probably with regard to Jubilee is that the party had promised its aspirants, those persons willing to participate on a Jubilee ticket, that IEBC will conduct their party primaries. And IEBC has given a timeline that party primaries will be conducted in April 13th to 26th of this year. So the parties are required to ensure that their primaries are in place. But IEBC, given that there are challenges, right now it's constrained. We see it's battling court cases with regard to the procurement of voter registration materials, ballot papers, auditing of the voter register. At the same time, also maybe conducting party primaries. It will be maybe a challenge for the Commission to have it conduct party primaries, and we know how politically charged these particular party elections can be, given that Jubilee is one of those major parties that everybody wants to have a cake, and because they know that if they are in those areas perceived to be Jubilee strongholds, then once you get that party ticket, you are assured of getting that position, whether it's at the county assembly level, or at Parliament, or at either the county level or at Parliament. So it is something. It's a high stake. It will be high stake party primaries, and IEBC maybe could not be. Probably they are weighing the option whether they should get involved in party primaries, given that maybe at times also party dispute resolutions might take long, and if IEBC is embroiled in this particular issue, then it might divert their attention in preparing for the major battle. Maybe as the famous Professor Pierre Lumumba will say, it will be akin to introducing a squirrel. When people are following an antelope, and to introduce a squirrel on their path, then they lose sight. So it's something that IEBC has to work very, very keenly on this particular path, whether it should involve itself in party primaries or focus on the August 8th polls, which is a national issue that everybody is looking on, and the entire globe. Sophia?
All right, Patrick, thank you for that. We look forward to hearing from you. That is, if the officials will be addressing the media after this meeting. Patrick Amimo live for us from the Jubilee Secretariat headquarters in Pangani. So let me bring that conversation back to studio. And that you've heard what Amimo is talking about, what risk perhaps IEBC runs into if, in fact, they choose to honor that request by Jubilee. Do you agree?
Yeah, it will pose serious logistical challenges. Mm-hmm. And IEBC is not prepared to run two elections. The nominations will be as good as a general election, because look at the interest in the Jubilee nominations. The number of aspirants in some of the wards, like one in Ruiru, I'm told, has 60 aspirants. Wow. So I don't think the IEBC is prepared to run two elections. Mm-hmm. So that would bog them down. What Jubilee needs to do is to set up an elections board. They did fairly credible nominations as TNA and as URP. So they can try to build on the experiences they got in 2013, set up an elections board, put up a register and be able to run their own nominations. Two, there are issues of funding. Who funds? Because if Jubilee were to use money from the exchequer to run the nominations, then that would pose a challenge, because it's not expressly provided for in law, and somebody is bound to go to court. So that would pose quite a bit of a challenge. The other side would also want to insist. They might also be keen on getting IEBC. Of course, those who want to dish out certificates will not be very happy, because if you have IEBC coming in, then those who have given you money to help them steal the nomination will not be able to benefit. So some of the political players will not be very keen on getting IEBC on board.
Yeah, but Prof, is that, seeking to have IEBC conduct the nominations a noble, question as far as looking at the political landscape and how we've seen nominations play out in the past? Because largely, as he was talking about handing out certificates, that it's already pre-known. It's about perhaps who can fork out more money. So eventually, do we need to get to a place where we come up with a system that nominations can be exercises that can be trusted?
I agree, and that's a very good question, Sophia, because it's actually at the center of the struggle in Jubilee right now and the code of related parties. There are those who believe that there are those party stalwarts who will be given direct nomination. There are already indications that some parties are already giving out nominations, like ODM has been accused for that, and even Jubilee, that there are some party stalwarts who may get that. So people are worried about that and creating out of anxiety.
Hence the decamping.
Yes, decamping. Smaller parties, parties. But I want to make a point of maybe diversion from the real thinking right now, the actual thing right now, because Jubilee is requesting IBC to conduct elections because it fears that its own internal body mechanisms cannot ensure a fair and free election because of interference from the so-called party stalwarts. And I think it is up to IBC to subcontract this activity. Cooperatives in this country hold elections every year, cooperatives, and they're done by consultants firms. The capacities that we have in this country is enormous on other firms to conduct elections.
But let me jump in. Why IBC to subcontract? Why not the party?
It has no capacity. Or the party, for that matter, or the party. But the problem is that the party might subcontract to somebody who
swing it their way.
Who swing it their way. So IBC might be in a more, I think, acceptable position and legitimate to actually subcontract a consultant's firm or a voter, conducting firm that can actually do that activity. We have seen this in America. Many county and local governments at set level are never done by the government, but the firms that are liable and are asked to conduct those elections. In Kenya, we seem to think that IBC must do everything. Then IBC says we have no capacity. They are looking at their staff members. They won't have to look at their staff members. They can take this task and subcontract even a body from Canada, from Kenya, from Tanzania, from Ghana to do this activity. The issue is just tallying votes and counting them fairly. Because if you have a neutral person like IBC, I believe they can conduct a more fair election in the Jubilee nominations, in the Cody nominations, or ODM nominations, and so on. Because our parties are people called insiders. Then there are those who are insiders of the inside. We know that for a fact. We know there are party stalwarts who actually fund these parties and so on. If you leave them out, they'll be hue and cry. So, and that's why those marginal candidates are very worried that they cannot compete in, for example, Nairobi governor's seat. There's a concern that Sonko, Waweru, Margaret Wanjiru, and so on, are all Sakaja, they're all party stalwarts. So who gets that? The only way to ensure that is to have IBC, which is so distant from Jubilee affairs, that they can actually award the person who wins fairly.
Okay. And of course, the political mathematics, as theรื่องexercise closes, will begin in as far as figuring out where do we have votes, where do we have numbers. Let's talk about Jubilee mapping their strongholds. According to one of the reports in the dailies today, they see 17 counties as their strongholds, and so does CORD. And Jubilee is talking about 13 being swing votes. Do you think that is about correct as far as the political landscape is concerned?
Yeah, the regions which are predominantly around Mount Kenya, they will, unless something drastic happens, which I don't see happening between now and August, they will still vote Jubilee. And the Kalenjin wing of Rift Valley, they are also likely to vote Jubilee. So those are the ones they have mapped, and they are the ones they are calling the Jubilee strongholds. Then you have Western, the former Western province. Then you have Nyanza, Luo Nyanza, and then you have Kisii. Kisii is mapped as a swing because in the last election, Kisii has two counties. There is Kisii and there is Nyamira. Uhuru got about 30% of the vote in the two Kisii counties. So the 70%, 65-70% went to Raila. That's why they are calling them swing. Then you come to Narok. In Narok, Raila won the presidential poll. Then the difference between him and Uhuru was 9,000 votes. You know, there is a heavy presence of the Kipsigis who are Kalenjin. Then there is also a heavy presence of the Kikuyus. But the original inhabitants are Maasai, and of course the other migrant communities. Then you have Kajiado. They have also mapped Kajiado as swing.
Yes.
But you know, Kajiado, Uhuru won Kajiado, the presidential poll. But the margin between him and Raila was not very huge. So those are some of the areas they are marking as a swing. Then we have the northeastern counties where they are seeing some of them voted CORD, some of them voted Jubilee. So those are the areas. But you can clearly see then Ukambani is mapped as NASA because of Kalonzo. The three Ukambani counties, those ones voted CORD.
Yeah.
Then there is Coast, which is voted predominantly ODM. But Jubilee also got quite some number of votes, but they are not as high. But they are trying to see if they can increase their numbers. Yeah. So based on the current registration, the Jubilee strongholds have a slight edge of about 300,000 votes.
Okay.
Yeah. Then Nairobi is a toss-up.
Yes.
Of course, it always votes opposition, and you can see even the governor is opposition.
Yeah.
But when you look at the number of MPs, even the number of MCS, they are even. 41. So currently Jubilee has 42, CORD has 41. And the difference between Uhuru and Raila was not very huge. So even when you look at the current registrations, it's almost reflecting the same. Of course, there is something funny happening in Kajiado. You've seen the percentages. They reached 212%. That tells you there is massive importation. People are either moving from Nairobi or moving from Kiambu to go and tilt the numbers there, because that's the only place which has registered more than 100%.
And it appears the strategy for Jubilee partly, Prof, is to, in the swing areas, launch more development projects.
Right.
With a bid to sway.
Right.
And also promise some more in the
Correct.
next 4 years if they do get into office. Do you agree?
I agree. I agree with sort of, I think, infrastructure development, special roads, and what we can call actually a capital infrastructure outlays in the so-called NASA strongholds. But I want to a little bit differ from Martin's analysis, because what was Jubilee that time is no longer Jubilee right now. But what NASA has done is actually to galvanize and even increase its strongholds. Because what we saw in 2013 was the Jubilee consolidating almost the entire Rift Valley. But right now, Bomet and Kericho, and even Baringo, and even West Pokot, and so on, and even Turkana are toss-ups. That areas that were regarded previously as Jubilee in the Rift Valley. So that Deputy President William Ruto has a strong command now of just part of the North Rift, not the entire North and South Rift. And that's, I think, is causing a lot of worries in Jubilee circles. And then secondly, the issue of NASA consolidation is one that revolves around Musalia Mudavadi's joining NASA coalition. Musalia Mudavadi got about 500 votes, about 500 votes. And the margin between Jubilee and the CORD was less than 500,000 votes. So the assumption is that Musalia is joining...
No, it was 800,000, Prof.
Yes.
Get the numbers correct. Okay. Musalia got 483,000.
Let me just finish my
point. The
point.
margin was 800,000.
Let me just finish my point.
Yeah.
My point is that Musalia as a crossing over to NASA has actually given NASA an advantage in terms of numbers. And then the other issue is that the lack of consolidation of Bomet now, which was initially Jubilee, now going to Mashanani, and then the Baringo, which is, we can see the shifts within the Kano strongholds and so on. So there's a likelihood that this contest will be much closer than ever before in Kenya's national election. And I want to point out that the mapping out is some of it is real. Like, for example, Nyanza, Western, Northeastern, Eastern being NASA is real. But Central and the parts of Rift Valley being Jubilee Israel. But I think the coastal region has almost, from 1992, voted opposition.
Yeah.
That has been very, very clear in the history of voting pattern in this country. So to point out that Jubilee has made encourages the euphoric turns of crowds in meetings and so on do not necessarily amount to votes in the actual election.
Final views?
You know, if you look at Baringo is very interesting.
Yeah.
Gideon Moi was part of what they were calling a Amani coalition, which was headed by Musalia, which had KANU, UDF, and New Ford Kenya. But you know, the presidential vote, they voted Jubilee. Gideon Moi never delivered any presidential votes to Musalia. That is the truth. Look at the numbers. Two, they are the numbers Eugene delivered to Musalia. Eugene and the New Ford Kenya Brigade.
Yeah.
That is Combo and the rest of the guys who are in Ford Kenya. Now, that team is in Jubilee. Then the group of UDF, Washiali, Shinali, Wangwe, the ones who are in UDF, 8 out of 12 MPs who are in UDF are now in Jubilee. So they might not move with all the numbers that they deliver to Musalia, but they might move some of those numbers to Jubilee, because in the last dispensation...
I disagree. That's unlikely.
In the last dispensation, Jubilee didn't have any foot soldiers in Kakamega County. Now they do. So you cannot discount the fact that they will be able to get some numbers. That's the truth. Because they also have support, they also have followers, you know. But you know, when you look at Bomet is very interesting, because Isaac Ruto has been hosting NASA, but he still insists he's not in NASA. Why hasn't he had the courage to say that he's joining NASA? Because it's tricky. If Raila Odinga is a candidate, it is going to be a very hard sell in Rift Valley. That's the truth. If Musalia is a candidate, it changes the dynamics completely. In fact, if NASA were to get a Musalia Kalonzo ticket, it would give Jubilee a very hard time. Yeah. And that is where now Rift Valley comes in. But when you look at Turkana voted ODM. Right. Then and Ford Kenya, because Munyes was the chairman of Ford Kenya, and Nanok was ODM. So that one is governor, the other one was senator. Right. But now they are now not in the same party. Munyes is running for governor on Jubilee.
That's true.
So last time Turkana voted CORD. Now they are split, you know.
Yeah. Then let me just. I know what has raised many of them are accurate in terms of analysis. Yes. What has happened in the past, what's likely to happen. But I want just to discount the issue of people like Washiali crossing, because you've seen this happen many times when people assume that they are close to government and they defect and they lose in the general election. They're not guaranteed that once they have crossed over as MPs, they'll also go to parliament, because dynamics change. And the issue that affected Western province politics was that at that time, Mr. Madrid was running as a French candidate in the presidential elections. But right now, he's in the mainstream opposition, NASA. That will totally change dynamics. That whoever leans to NASA and gets nominated to run will actually almost automatically win elections, whether it's a gubernatorial level, senatorship, or MPship, and so on. But the challenge is that now, like Martin says, these are now members of NASA, like the governorship in Kakamega. Galwale is in Ford Kenya, which is a part of NASA, and then Oparanya is an ODM, which is part of NASA. Okay. So there will be internal competition, but at the end of the day, I think the strongholds can probably map out that Nyanza is NASA, that Ukambani is NASA, that Western, part of it, I think maybe 90% can be regarded as NASA, except a few pockets, and that Coast is not a swing area. Coast remains opposition.
Coast is not mapped as swing. Coast is not mapped as swing. Western is not mapped as swing. Yeah. Western is mapped as NASA.
Yes.
Yeah, but what I'm telling you, you know, the dynamics about those guys who have defected, losing elections, they are prospects. Yeah. But they also look at, in 2013, you see how Ruto and Uhuru ran their campaign. They went to Mount Elgon, which is Sabot. Right. Sabot's a Kalenjin, you know? Right. Then from Mount Elgon, they made a brief stopover in Bungoma, because there is a bit of migrants in Mount Kenya. Then from there, they never stepped in Kakamega. They flew to Migori. going where the Kurias are, you know. And Uhuru beat Raila in the Kuria constituencies, in the presidential poll.
Okay, yeah. Let's bring this back to Jubilee and some of their prospects as they're doing their math ahead of the elections. We've seen some defections, of course, both to Jubilee and to Kord or NASA now, if you like. But there are also those moving to the smaller parties, like Chap Chap. Does that have any implication, especially, say, on Jubilee, and you see the likes of Kivuti moving to us party?
You know, the ones who are moving, they see there are no prospects of getting the ticket. You see, Kiraitu Murungi, who is the current senator of Meru, and Dr. Noah Wekesa were the chairman of the co-steering committee, which formed the Jubilee. So Munya knew he will not have any chance if he is going to do a nomination with Kiraitu. So he moves out, he acquires a PNU. Now you have Kivuti has realized Mbarire is sitting pretty. Because Kariuki Mate, who is the speaker of Embu Senate, of the county assembly in Embu, he is an official at the National Secretariat, and that is the campaign manager of Mbarire. So it is natural and strategic. You don't waste time here. So he has gone to Chap Chap. Kilemi Mwire has also gone to Chap Chap. You saw more people even from Tharaka-Nithi. They are also gravitating towards Chap Chap.
But does that affect the presidential race in as far as Jubilee being able to keep this core support?
No, but you see, all those guys are saying they are supporting Uhuru for president. Yeah, so what Uhuru must do is to keep off from the local politics. Because you see, like in Kirinyaga, you have Martha Karua running on NAK Kenya. Now, if you go and antagonize Martha Karua, then she can very easily tell her supporters not to vote for Uhuru. And you see, that would suppress the presidential numbers. And you know, an election which is close, if the opposition is able to hold, and they agree on the candidates, then they sort out the Luya equation, because that's what Professor has not talked about. The Luya equation is, you have Musalia, you have Wetangula here. If you are going to have Raila as a candidate and Kalonzo is a running mate, then you have in Nairobi, Kidero is the candidate and Mweke is a running mate. What is the stake of the Luyas in this equation? And you know, the Luyas would ask, what would Musalia be going to tell the Luyas, support this arrangement? What is our stake here? So they have no business in Jubilee, they have no business in court. What is going to happen is, most of them will not vote, because you cannot go and promise them what is not there, you know. I've heard Musalia talking about...
I disagree.
No, that's the truth.
Because
let's hear his view. Why do you disagree?
I disagree because I think let's not look at NASA as just Raila, Kalonzo, Musalia, Wetangula affair. There are also others like Joe and others. And I want to point this out. When you're not on the ticket, it doesn't mean that because these politicians are also futuristic. They also see, because Musalia is 57 years old. At 57 years old, and Raila is almost 70, Musalia can run, he has chances to run 3 more, 4 times ahead. So if he's futuristic, he'll know that a Raila ticket with the under NASA and Musalia is there in the 50s, Kalonzo is there at 64, they still have a chance at short of the presidency. So if you're a politician and you're visionary, you have to be led by that. I don't believe that they are so much governed by short-term gains of the presidents alone. They're also looking ahead, that there's a future in this arrangement, in this NASA. If NASA holds together in the next 10, 15, 20 years, they're all assured. Just like Jubilee is assured that if they can hold it together, the Kikuyu and the Kalajan alliance, that Ruto can have a fair chance in 2022. But the fear, and I think I agree with you, the fear in many areas is that with the arrangement stick, because Kibaki had an MOU with the Raila and others, and he basically ditched the MOU. That will Raila
with Kalonzo so
will Raila be man enough to own up to the MOU of the one term? He's saying that he wants to have 1 term and then let the next person come in. Will he be honorable enough to do that? And if he doesn't do that, we saw what happened. They'll be falling out, and he's aware of that. There's a falling out that was very, very vicious last time. So I disagree on the notion that if Musalia is not on the ticket, then Luyas run away. That if Kalonzo is not on the ticket, then Kambas run away. If Raila is not on the ticket, then all those run away. What they are working on is a mechanism to ensure that they have 2 top strong people to run against Jubilee. And if that works and they stick together, they have a chance of succeeding.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We had Professor Maurice Amutabi,